Welcome back. Kind of a dreary start to our Friday. In Texas, we're getting a lot of stratus and stratocumulus coming up from the Gulf, and there it is. Base is about 2,000 to 3,000 feet, overcast, and there are a few higher layers up there. But otherwise, a very scenic picture there of a small Texas town. Let's look at the upper level chart. This is the 250 millibar chart up at the top of the troposphere, and what we see here is a split flow pattern. Let's start with the basics. We've got a cutoff high over Alaska. That's actually a very strong ridge that has kind of broken off into an upper level cutoff high right there. Part of this huge ridge extending up into Alaska. We've also got a cutoff low moving onshore. That's been kind of working its way like that. And then we've got a very broad area of troughing across much of central and eastern North America. The pattern is broken up into a split flow, and this is either a subtropical jet or it may have some characteristics of the polar front jet. So we'll take a look. The fact that we've got this cutoff low right here suggests that this is probably a hybrid polar subtropical jet or possibly even a polar jet. So we'll take a look and try to unravel that mystery. So here's where we can get some of our first clues. This is the height, which is solid, along with thickness in dashed lines. So thickness is going to give us a measure of the average temperature in the lowest 3 kilometers, and that'll help us find fronts. For example, you see all these dashed lines right there. That's a baroclinic zone. So there's a good chance that that is associated with a frontal system. Most likely, if we were to actually analyze it, it'd be broken up something like that. So a little frontal system moving southwest, and that should head its way towards Oregon in the next day or so. And behind that, the troughing associated with the cold air advection. But down to the south, yeah, we do have a thickness gradient in that area. See all that right there? There's a definite difference in temperature going from Texas to Arizona. So that tells us that this is probably a polar front jet at this time. That's not to say that there can't be a subtropical jet embedded in that, but that's something for us to look for as we go through the charts. So here we have the surface analysis for midday, and we can see definitely a frontal boundary in Texas. Let's go ahead and draw that. There's that front extending from Texas. You can see the contrast in temperature from, say, Houston up to Childress and Dallas-Fort Worth. And also in West Texas, we've got some upslope flow. And we've also got overrunning with the south flow in South Texas streaming up over the top of that air mass. And so that gives us kind of an early spring thunderstorm scenario. Places like Midland, Roswell, and Hobbs. It's not a good tornado setup because you can see the surface temperature and dew point are pretty low, but good chance of some thunderstorm activity, especially this time of year. And if you were to actually want to go out and chase and see some structure, you'd want to go down south near that frontal boundary around the Fort Stockton area. Out in the western U.S., it's a little more indeterminate. I guess we could draw a front, maybe something like I don't know, I'm seeing a little bit of indication of that because of the westerly components of the winds in California. And in between, we know that that's a tropical air mass. So we'll check that out on the charts as we go forward. And one area of interest also is the Pacific Northwest. There it is. Looks like some cold air coming down through Washington and through the Portland area, giving a little bit of blustery conditions in that area. And one other region we shouldn't forget is Canada. Look at that really terrible weather there in Quebec down to Maine and New England. Getting a bit of a winter weather situation there north of Quebec City and Montreal. And just to kind of draw the fronts, looks like it's running something like that there. And you can see that the air behind the front there in Pennsylvania and New York is not that cold. Lots of 50s and 60s. And it cools off very gradually as you get back towards Chicago and Minneapolis. So we can see that the big weather maker is going to be in the Rocky Mountains. Looks like some really inclement conditions in Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana along that front that is stalled out against the Rocky Mountain range. So there's the southwestern U.S., very classic presentation of a comet cloud. Obviously, that upper level system is pretty far inland, moving through the Four Corners area. And let me just give you a rough approximation of where that comet cloud is. It runs kind of like that. So it's got a pretty large extent. Back in behind it, we've got the area of subsidence, sinking motion, but it is very unstable. So we're getting a lot of cumuliform clouds in that area and a little bit of showery activity, maybe some rain and snow showers in the mountains in that region. Up to the north, a little bit of winter weather in Utah and Colorado. Right in this area, that's a region to keep an eye on. And if you don't see the comet cloud, let's zoom out and look at the water vapor. There's the water vapor imagery, and you can certainly see that comet cloud there. And in behind it, the brown colors and light blue correspond to the sinking motion. And let me see if I can shade that in. That's the sinking motion moving into Tucson and Baja California, Phoenix, and that corresponds to a lot of mid and upper level subsidence. It's actually a fast moving system, so we've got to go to San Diego to see that subsidence. And what we see on the sounding here is the very low tropopause, all the way down to about 25,000 feet. And we also see the very dry conditions in the mid levels. And even aloft, yeah, some very dry conditions up above the troposphere. In the Pacific Northwest, some very impressive cold air advection coming down offshore. You can see it right in this area here. That's kind of like the Alaska Express. And out ahead of it, there's a frontal system right there. That's the one that's heading towards Oregon. And we can see that there's not a whole lot reflected in the satellite in Washington and Oregon. So most likely what's happening as far as that front, it's likely a very shallow front coming down like that. Okay, I should be using the cold front drawing tool, but that'll do for now. That's the shallow cold air moving south. So if this system moves inland, we could watch for the potential of overrunning on top of that cold dome there, moving across the Columbia River Valley. Kind of a nice day in the North Plains, a little bit cold, of course, with that cold high coming down. But only when you get down into Nebraska and Kansas do you pick up the frontal system moving out of the Rockies. A lot of cloud. And let's move down in that area and check that out. And there it is. We see the frontal system. That's part of that huge comet cloud coming in from the Rockies, so it is crossing the mountains. And we see two different cloud regimes. One is kind of a tropical-looking cumuliform area right here that's similar to what we see like in May and June, July. And then up to the north, we see a lot of mid and upper level cloud up in this region. So some of that could be from the frontal system coming from the west. It could also indicate a frontal boundary in that area. And especially, you can see kind of like the outline of some low clouds right there. See that's not cirrus, that's actually a low cloud. So that right there tells me that's probably a frontal boundary of some sort, running about like that there. The southeast U.S. looking pretty good. We can see easterly flow coming onto the Florida coast there. Looks pretty calm out in the Gulf. Tropical southerly flow coming into Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And then across the Carolinas, just some mid-level cloud and a bit of high cloud from that trough out to the west. In offshore, we can see a little bit of the tail end of that cold front that's departing the northeast coast. There it is. Nice little line of clouds out in the Atlantic. And we'll switch over to the northeast U.S. and check that out. Classic departing front. A couple different weather regimes. One is the baroclinic system, located right there. That's got a lot of your nimbostratus, altostratus, stratocumulus. And then we get back in behind it, and we've got the cold air advection region. So this is a lot drier in the mid and upper levels. And where there's residual surface moisture, we get a little bit of convection forming right there. A little bit of heating mixing with the convection, or mixing with the moisture, and we get our showers. And that's moving through the Albany area down to Scranton and down to Harrisburg. And that'll probably be approaching the Hudson River Valley, Philadelphia, and New York City later today. And back in behind it, there's a huge area of cold air advection. You can see a little bit of lake effect clouds there in Michigan. Western sides of the lake, clear. Eastern sides, cloudy. And a little bit of that same effect going on around the Buffalo and Erie area. So how are we doing on precipitation? Here's the United States drought monitor. Looks like problems out west, getting back in a drought pattern, and we especially hate seeing that in spring because we're starting to get out of that rainy season there. So it's probably going to be pretty dry there in California. Rocky Mountain's also a little bit dry, and the worst hit area is South Texas. Rainfall totals year to date looks like this. So this is going back over the past 70 to 75 days, showing the big precip deficit there in California and Nevada, also southern Colorado, and there's that other area in South Texas where they've had dry conditions for quite a while. The only place actually getting a good amount of rain is the mid-Mississippi River Valley down to Alabama and Mississippi, and also in Montana and Wyoming. They've been doing pretty good on rainfall for, I think, a good year, maybe. And of course, West Texas also looking pretty good also. And of course, ultimately, what it comes down to is the soil moisture. There's the soil moisture chart there. This is the anomaly. And very dry conditions there in Northern California, Sacramento, San Francisco, Stockton, that area going into a very dry summer, and that tells me wildfire potential. Also around the San Antonio area down to Victoria, that area low on soil moisture also. And that's a sneak peek of what we're looking at for this summer. This is temperature. Looks like a good probability that will be above normal in Arizona and Nevada, so that's bad news. This is probably going to increase the wildfire potential in parts of California. Looks like normal conditions across the north central U.S. And this tells me there's probably going to be a little bit of troughiness over the summer in the north central U.S., and that usually corresponds to an increase in precip because we get more storms forming in the Corn Belt, and they move eastward, and we get kind of a rainy summer in the Great Lakes area. And the precip chart seems to kind of bear that out. As you go east, increased precip likelihood, and then they're focusing on the main drought areas to form up in the Pacific Northwest for this summer. Here's the situation for tonight. We can see thunderstorms developing in West Texas, around Midland to Clovis and up to north of Amarillo. Since they're crossing over into the cold air mass, it's very unlikely that they're going to become surface-based, but we could see some small hail in a few of those storms. Very strong pressure gradient there in northern Montana. It's going to give kind of blustery, showery weather in that region. And then the outgoing system in the northeast U.S., bringing some strong cold air advection across New England. And you can see the boxes formed between the thickness and the sea level pressure, indicating very strong cold air advection. For tomorrow night, it looks like that front in Texas lifts northward as a warm front. So that's showing the very strong southerly flow we have in place, and that's bringing a lot of lift along that frontal boundary into Arkansas and Oklahoma. Blustery conditions continuing in Montana with that strong high moving into the high plains area of that state. And then a new frontal system coming into California and Nevada. And that's that one that's offshore from Oregon, moving more in a southeasterly direction due to that strong northerly upper level flow in that region. In behind it, some very showery weather across much of northern California, hopefully putting a dent in that drought, but a lot of it is going to be concentrated in the mountains. Sierra Nevada there showing a good chance of snow showers. in places like Big Bear, Lake Tahoe, and whatever other areas there are. I'm not too familiar with that part of the Sierra Nevadas, but anyway. For Sunday night, we get another kick of that front in Texas and Oklahoma, so it's pushing right back southwestward through the state, right up to the mountains again. It's almost like going back in time because, yeah, the front's back where it was, and it looks like that system in Nevada and California hasn't moved. But what's happened is a wave has moved up that boundary, probably coming from off the California coast, and when that happens, you end up with kind of a stationary front, and that's what's happening there in California. So more snow showers for the Sierra Nevada. Not much change for Monday. Stationary front in West Texas, still banked up against the mountains there, and the system in California continues to consolidate, and there we see a slight deepening of the low, another wave moving up that boundary, and more rain for the San Joaquin Valley and snow for the Sierra Nevada mountains. And here we've got the chart for Tuesday night. Front in Texas lifts northward slightly up to the Dallas-Fort Worth area and Lubbock. Looks like rain chances go up as the troughing approaches from the west. Height falls coming in from there. And the main weather system in the Pacific consolidates even further, wraps up into the Great Basin area. This is a bit of an unusual pattern. Can't remember seeing one like this. Big cutoff low there in California, so some showery conditions in that region, and then the main frontal system up there in the Great Basin. On Wednesday, we'll be seeing the main system finally advancing into the Rocky Mountains proper, so chances for snow showers, rain showers are going to go up substantially in New Mexico and southern Colorado. Main baroclinic low still hanging back there in Utah. And a stationary front in Texas will continue to produce scattered to broken showers and thunderstorms in that area. And then up north, we can see a new Alberta Clipper working its way southward. Looks like a 1030 millibar high there pushing that southward. So that'll probably start interacting with these systems later next week. And oh boy, does it change substantially. Thursday night looking like this. Very well developed baroclinic system in the Central Plains. Got very strong upslope flow in Nebraska, Cheyenne area. Looks like some blizzard conditions in that region. And the frontal system in Texas lifts rapidly northward. And I think this will be a good setup for some severe weather in parts of the Midwest, Illinois, Indiana, for Thursday. And then we got the dry line moving into Texas with that very strong westerly flow. And that's probably going to be a good downslope setup, so maybe some temperatures getting unseasonably high in Oklahoma, southwest Kansas, and Texas. Then for Friday night, the big high moves into much of the eastern U.S. Little wave picks up on the western part of that boundary, moves through Texas, produces a bit of thunderstorm activity as it sweeps eastward. So this is kind of like a mini Alberta Clipper working its way eastward along the tail end of that front. 1040 millibar high moving southward. And really, to be honest, I think the frontal setup is somewhat like this. You can see the thickness gradient out in New Mexico and Texas, so that probably puts the boundary further south like that, and then maybe a secondary front back here. For Saturday, most of our attention shifts down to southwest Texas. Looks like some very tight baroclinicity in the Big Bend area and Del Rio, so we may see some severe weather chances in that area. Maybe the Serrano del Burro mountain thunderstorms will get going. It's that time of the year. And then along the front range of the Rockies, it looks like a little bit of a residual polar front boundary dammed against the mountains there. And then for Sunday, it looks like a very powerful system sweeping through Arizona and northwest Mexico. Another cutoff low there off the California coast, and then a stationary front across much of Texas. So continued unsettled in that area. More rain chances for much of the month, looks like. More rain chances persisting. So that's the situation we have for today. looks pretty unsettled, and I think we'll see some very interesting weather coming up in the week ahead. So definitely come back and check it out. Hope you all stay safe with the virus. I do appreciate your Patreon donations if you can make that happen, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.